The blade dropped, the crowd roared, and then something absolutely horrifying happened that nobody expected. A mysterious woman appeared from the shadows and did the unthinkable with their freshly severed heads. What she created will make your blood run cold. The last king and queen of France didn't just lose their heads on the guillotine. Their final moments were captured in a way that still haunts us today. You won't believe what happened next.
It was noon. With the blade suspended above her, Marie Antoinette moved forward and accidentally stepped on the executioner's foot.
Marie Antoinette, the last queen of France before the Revolution, met her end on a guillotine in the center of Paris on October 16, 1793. Her execution came just months after her husband, King Louis XVI, had suffered the same fate on the very same device. The executioner who took her life was Charles Henri Sanson, the same man who had beheaded her husband. But what makes this story particularly fascinating is what happened immediately after her death. A woman named Marie Tussaud, who would later become famous for her wax museums, managed to create a plaster death mask of the executed queen's severed head. This mask remains one of the most haunting artifacts from the French Revolution, offering us a glimpse into the final moments of one of history's most controversial royal figures. To understand how Marie Antoinette ended up on the scaffold, we need to look at her journey from Austrian princess to the most hated woman in France. She arrived in the country as a young girl of 14, sent by her mother, Empress Maria Theresa of Austria, to marry the future King of France. This marriage was purely political, designed to strengthen ties between Austria and France. 4 years after her arrival, when she was just 18 years old, her husband became King Louis XVI, making her Queen of France. From the beginning, Marie Antoinette struggled to fit into her role. She was young, isolated in a foreign country, and frustrated by her husband's awkward personality and their incompatible temperaments. Instead of focusing on royal duties, she threw herself into the pleasures of court life. She spent her days gambling, attending lavish parties, and purchasing expensive clothes, jewelry, and furniture. The French court at Versailles was already known for its extravagance, but Marie Antoinette took this to new levels. She had entire rooms at the palace redecorated according to her tastes, buying the finest furniture from across Europe. Her spending became so notorious that people began calling her Madame Deficit, a nickname that reflected the growing financial crisis facing France. It would be unfair to paint Marie Antoinette as purely selfish. Historical records show that she did have a compassionate side. She adopted several poor children and genuinely cared for them. She also showed kindness to individuals who served her. However, these private acts of charity were completely overshadowed by her very public displays of wealth at a time when ordinary French people were struggling to afford bread. The situation grew worse with an incident known as the Diamond Necklace Affair. A cunning countess managed to trick a cardinal into purchasing an incredibly expensive diamond necklace, claiming it was for the queen. Although Marie Antoinette had nothing to do with the scheme and never received the necklace, many French people believe she had orchestrated the whole thing to get the jewelry without paying for it. This scandal destroyed what little remained of her reputation. People already saw her as a symbol of royal excess, and this incident seemed to confirm their worst suspicions. As France's financial problems deepened, anger toward the monarchy grew. The price of bread, a staple food for ordinary people, kept rising while the royal family continued their lavish lifestyle. Revolutionary sentiments spread across the country. In July 1789, Parisian crowds stormed the Bastille prison, marking the beginning of the French Revolution. Protests erupted in cities and towns throughout France. Women marched to the gates of Versailles, demanding bread and accountability from their rulers. The royal family's situation became increasingly desperate. In June 1791, Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette attempted to flee France, hoping to reach the Austrian-controlled Netherlands, where they might find safety and support. However, their escape plan failed spectacularly. They were recognized, captured, and brought back to Paris. This attempted escape proved catastrophic for their cause. Whatever sympathy some French people might have felt for them evaporated. They were now seen not just as out-of-touch rulers, but as traitors trying to abandon France. The royal family was imprisoned in a fortress known as the Temple. France officially abolished the monarchy and declared itself a republic, ending nearly 1,000 years of royal rule. In January 1793, King Louis XVI was put on trial for treason against the state and the French people. He was found guilty and sentenced to death. Marie Antoinette was forced to watch as her husband spent his final hours with their family before being taken away to his execution. After the king's death, Marie Antoinette's situation grew even bleaker. She was transferred from the Temple to a prison called the Conciergerie, which had earned the grim nickname of the antechamber to the guillotine. This name was well-deserved, as most prisoners held there were eventually executed. Marie Antoinette spent the final 11 weeks of her life in a small, damp cell in this prison. By this point, she was 37 years old, but she looked far older. The stress and grief had turned her hair completely white, and her skin had become pale and unhealthy from months of imprisonment in poor conditions. Her trial began in October 1793 and lasted an exhausting 36 hours, with some days running for 18 hours straight. The prosecutors brought numerous charges against her, including high treason, depleting the national treasury, and conspiracy against the security of the state. Most shockingly, they also accused her of incest with her own son. This particular accusation was designed to utterly destroy her character in the eyes of the public. Marie Antoinette denied these charges with dignity and grace, and even her enemies had to admit she conducted herself well during the trial. However, her composure could not save her. The outcome had likely been decided before the trial even began. In the early hours of October 16, 1793, Marie Antoinette was found guilty on all charges. Her execution was scheduled for that same day. In the hours before she was taken to the scaffold, guards cut off most of her white hair, as was customary before a guillotine execution. This prevented the hair from interfering with the blade and ensured a clean cut. At 12:15 in the afternoon, Marie Antoinette walked onto the scaffold at the Place de la Révolution, the same location where her husband had been executed months earlier. She was dressed in a simple white dress, having been stripped of all the finery she had once worn as queen. Waiting for her was Charles Henri Sanson, wearing his black executioner's mask. The situation must have been surreal for Sanson. Years earlier, he had worked for the royal family. Now he was about to execute the Queen of France. As Marie Antoinette stepped onto the scaffold, she accidentally stepped on the executioner's foot. Despite knowing she was moments from death, she whispered an apology to him, saying, "Pardon me, sir, I did not mean to." These were her final words, a small moment of politeness in the midst of brutal violence. Sanson quickly strapped her to the wooden plank of the guillotine and slid her body beneath the blade. He released the mechanism, and the heavy blade fell, severing her head in one quick blow. Sanson then picked up her head and held it high for the crowd to see, shouting, "Long live the Republic!" After the execution, Marie Antoinette's body and head were loaded onto a cart and transported about half a mile north to a graveyard behind the Church of the Madeleine. This cemetery had become a dumping ground for victims of the guillotine. When the cart arrived, the gravediggers were on their lunch break. This pause gave Marie Tussaud, who had been waiting for this opportunity, a chance to approach the body. Working quickly, she created a plaster cast of the Queen's severed head. Once she had completed the death mask, the Queen's remains were thrown into an unmarked mass grave. Over the following year, this cemetery would fill up with more and more bodies of people deemed enemies of the Revolution. Marie Antoinette's body remained in that unmarked grave for over 20 years. On January 18, 1815, after the monarchy had been restored in France, her remains were exhumed along with those of her husband. They were given proper Christian burials in the royal necropolis at the Basilica of Saint-Denis, where French kings and queens had been buried for centuries. The death mask, created by Madame Tussaud, shows Marie Antoinette with her eyes closed and her lips pressed together. Her hair is cut short, just as it had been right before her execution. The mask shows marks and imperfections on her face, capturing the reality of her final moments. Using this plaster cast, Madame Tussaud later created wax figures that brought the dead queen back to life in a sense. These figures showed the world what the Queen of France looked like in death, with remarkable detail and accuracy. Today, Marie Antoinette remains a controversial historical figure. To many people at the time, she represented everything wrong with the French monarchy. She became a scapegoat for France's financial problems, even though many of those problems existed long before she arrived in the country. Her taste for expensive things and her enormous spending on palace renovations, while ordinary people starved, made her an easy target for revolutionary anger. Like thousands of others during the French Revolution, she lost her head on the guillotine. Those who witnessed her execution never forgot the sight of the former Queen of France meeting such a violent end. The death mask preserved by Madame Tussaud ensures that we too can glimpse the face of Marie Antoinette in her final moments, a lasting reminder of the revolution's terrible power and the dramatic fall of the French monarchy. The French Revolution stands as one of the most transformative periods in human history. What began as protests against inequality and hunger evolved into a massive upheaval that would completely reshape French society and send shockwaves across Europe. At the heart of this revolution was a dramatic moment that few could have imagined possible just years earlier: the execution of King Louis XVI himself. The civilian population had risen up against their monarch, and in doing so, they abolished a system of royal rule that had existed in France for nearly 1,000 years. The period that followed the king's death became known as the Reign of Terror, during which approximately 17,000 people were led to the guillotine in different cities and towns across France. Dozens of executions took place daily, as revolutionary leaders like Maximilien Robespierre worked relentlessly to eliminate anyone suspected of sympathizing with the old monarchy. But this wave of violence all began with the shocking execution of King Louis XVI on January 21, 1793. After his death, Marie Tussaud created a cast of the king's severed head, just as she would later do for Queen Marie Antoinette. This haunting recreation shows us the face of the last king of France in his final moments. King Louis XVI was not born expecting to become king. He was actually the third son in his family, which meant the crown should have passed to his older brothers first. However, both of his older brothers died young, leaving Louis as the heir to the throne. When his grandfather, King Louis XV, died in 1774, the 20-year-old Louis suddenly found himself as King of France. From the beginning, he was an awkward fit for the role. Unlike previous French kings who projected strength and confidence, Louis XVI was shy, indecisive, and more interested in locksmithing and hunting than in politics and governing. His marriage to Marie Antoinette proved problematic in many ways. While the queen threw herself into the pleasures of court life, spending enormous sums on parties, gambling, and luxury goods, the king struggled to manage the country's growing problems. France was facing a serious financial crisis. Previous kings had spent lavishly and borrowed heavily to fund wars, and now the bills were coming due. The national treasury was nearly empty, yet the royal household continued to spend money at an alarming rate. Meanwhile, ordinary French people were suffering terribly. The price of bread, which was the main food for most families, kept rising. Poor harvests made the situation worse. People who worked hard all day often could not afford to feed their children. When they looked at the monarchy living in spectacular luxury at Versailles, their anger grew. The contrast between the suffering of the common people and the extravagance of the royal court became impossible to ignore. Revolutionary sentiment began to spread throughout France. On July 14, 1789, a crowd of Parisians stormed the Bastille prison, a fortress that symbolized royal authority. This event is now considered the start of the French Revolution. Protests and riots erupted across the country. The revolutionaries adopted a motto that captured their goals: liberty, equality, and fraternity. the situation for the royal family deteriorated rapidly. In October 1789, a large group of women marched from Paris to Versailles, angry about bread prices and demanding action from the king. They forced the royal family to leave Versailles and move to Paris, where they could be watched more closely. The king and queen were essentially prisoners, though they were not yet officially arrested. Their situation worsened dramatically in June 1791, when Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette attempted to escape from France. They planned to reach the Austrian-controlled Netherlands, where Marie Antoinette's family might provide them with military support. The escape attempt was poorly planned and executed. The royal family was recognized during their journey and arrested in the town of Varennes. They were brought back to Paris in disgrace. This attempted escape proved that the king could not be trusted. Whatever support still existed for the monarchy largely evaporated after this incident. The royal family was imprisoned in a medieval fortress called the Temple. France officially abolished the monarchy in September 1792 and declared itself a republic. For the first time in nearly a millennium, France had no king. The question then became what to do with Louis XVI. Some argued he should be exiled or imprisoned for life, but the most radical voices called for his execution, arguing that as long as he lived, he would be a rallying point for those who wanted to restore the monarchy. Louis XVI was put on trial in December 1792. He was brought from the Temple prison to stand before the National Convention, the revolutionary government. The charges against him included high treason and crimes against the state. On January 15, 1793, the members of the National Convention voted on his guilt. Out of 721 deputies present, 693 declared him guilty. The next question was what punishment he should receive. 361 deputies voted for immediate execution. In the end, Louis XVI was condemned to death by a single vote. It was one of the closest and most consequential votes in history. The execution was scheduled for January 21, 1793. On that morning, Louis XVI woke early. His personal valet helped him dress for the final time. The king then met with an Irish priest to make his confession and receive communion. He wanted to say goodbye to his family one last time, but his advisor suggested against it, saying it would be too emotionally difficult. Instead, Louis gave his final wishes to the priest. He wanted his royal seal to go to his son, and he asked that his wedding ring be given to his wife. At 9 in the morning, a green carriage was waiting for him. Louis climbed in, accompanied by the priest and 2 guards. The carriage left the temple and began the journey to the place of execution. Drummers walked alongside the carriage, beating their drums continuously to prevent supporters from hearing the king. The route was lined with 80,000 soldiers from the National Guard. Cavalry soldiers with drawn swords escorted the carriage as well. At 10 o'clock in the morning, the carriage arrived at the Place de la Révolution. In the center of the square stood the scaffold with the guillotine upon it. This execution device had been developed just a few years earlier as a supposedly humane method of execution. Ironically, Louis XVI himself had approved the use of the guillotine, never imagining that he would one day die on it. Louis walked firmly across the scaffold and, with just a look, managed to silence the drums. In a loud, clear voice, he declared that he died innocent of all the crimes he had been accused of. He said he forgave those who had brought about his death, and he prayed to God that the blood about to be shed would never bring harm to France. Charles Henri Sanson, the executioner, approached the king. His assistants moved to bind the king's hands with a handkerchief. They then cut Louis's hair and removed his shirt collar to ensure nothing would interfere with the blade. Louis was led up onto the scaffold. Once there, he tried to speak to the crowd again, proclaiming his innocence. However, someone ordered the drummers to begin their drum roll, drowning out his words. The executioners moved quickly, fastening the king to the guillotine's wooden bench. Then the blade was released. It fell rapidly, and the king's head was severed from his body at exactly 10:22 in the morning. Sanson grabbed the severed head from the basket where it had fallen and held it up high for the crowd to see. People rushed forward, dipping their handkerchiefs in the king's blood as souvenirs of this historic moment. The crowd erupted in shouts of "Long live the nation" and "Long live the Republic." Shortly after the execution, Marie Tussaud was able to create a death mask of King Louis XVI's severed head. The death mask she created shows the king's face in his final moments, capturing his expression after the blade had fallen. The king's body was taken to the Church of the Madeleine and buried essentially as a common citizen. His body was thrown onto a bed of quicklime at the bottom of a pit and covered with earth. In a final indignity, his head was placed at his feet, rather than with his body. The execution of King Louis XVI sent a clear message about the power and intentions of the French Revolution. His wife, Marie Antoinette, would follow him to the guillotine 9 months later. Thousands more would lose their heads during the reign of terror that followed. The death mask created by Madame Tussaud preserves for us the image of the last king of France, a reminder of a monarchy that ended in violence and a revolution that changed the world forever.